Inside the secret world of the surveillance industry.
Heavy, very heavy.
You can intercept the communication of your targets, send fake short messages.
Our undercover reporter exposes the spy merchants willing to sell powerful eavesdropping equipment to anyone willing to pay.
We don't know who is the end user, and we don't care. We have done it before.
It can cost up to 20 million euros.
Europe's most advanced producers of spyware explain how they circumvent international sanctions with ease.
First, we are okay with the Iran. Of course, it's subject to export restriction, but this is something that we can manage.
We hear of the damage that surveillance technology can do to democracy.
E quindi sostanzialmente avevano bisogno di un sistema quanto piuttosto i dissidenti politici.
And we expose the methods used to cover their tracks.
We can sell to your shell company, no
No
brand.
brand, no any brand.
We wipe everything, wipe everything.
There will be no logo, even use a fake email account.
How many other Italians has exported these in, let me say, deep grade countries? Lots.
These are the deals putting our privacy at risk.
I find it unacceptable. I would like to see transparency in this very, very dark and dangerous market.
The safeguards protecting our private life are disappearing.
These are the nuclear weapons of the 21st century.
The surveillance state is the acid that eats out democracy from within.
Inside the spyware game. Big money, dirty tricks, and a legal structure unable to control who is spying on you.
Edward Snowden, the defense contractor who leaked information about U.S. surveillance methods,
they had charged him in the U.S. courts
with espionage, theft, and conversion of government property.
Edward Snowden blew the whistle on a secret program of mass surveillance carried out by the United States government and its allies.
You ultimately have to make a choice about what do you have a greater commitment to, the law or to justice.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit enters this hidden world where companies make and sell equipment to intelligence and law enforcement agencies.
Talk of Russian hacking, of Democratic Party emails.
Released by WikiLeaks.
Tended to interfere with the U.S. election process.
It's a global multi-million-dollar industry whose products can capture your life on your phone, tablet, and computer. One that operates with few controls and little political oversight.
Even as a politician who is responsible for human rights, foreign policy, specifically export controls, it is difficult for me to know how big this market is. These companies operate in the dark.
When these technologies end up in the wrong hands, they end up with agencies which have a very proven and bloody history of repression and human rights abuse.
For many of the companies in the high-tech arena, they will sell their surveillance wares to anybody who wants to buy them. It doesn't matter what the morality or the ethics are. I have a service, I have surveillance. I can sell it to the highest bidder. It doesn't matter. Who cares?
We wanted to find out how easy it is to break the rules intended to control the sale of spyware. It's a world closed to outsiders, where manufacturers mingle with intelligence officers and arms dealers. So we found an insider, a man prepared to approach spyware companies he's worked with for years, using that trust to get to the truth. We agreed to protect his identity and refer to him simply as James.
I think people would be really shocked to see how some of these surveillance companies operate. For some of them, their only concern is money. They really have no interest in how this equipment is used. That's why I'm doing this. I want people to be able to see that world, my world.
Posing as a middleman, James planned to take 3 deals to the market for clients that shouldn't be able to buy mass surveillance equipment. The first client we would propose is the government of South Sudan. Accused by international organizations of human rights abuses, the sale of surveillance technology to this client would require specific export licenses and raise moral questions. The second client would be the security services of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Currently under European Union sanctions, the sale of surveillance equipment to Iran is prohibited by law. Lastly, could James obtain restricted surveillance equipment without telling the company who the client was? Any company agreeing to this deal wouldn't know if he was buying on behalf of a criminal gang or a terrorist organization. The first product James would try to buy for his clients is an interception device called an IMSI catcher.
Some of the most intrusive tools in the surveillance industry's locker are small and mobile. An IMSI catcher is a portable surveillance device that can be driven to anywhere the target is. Some are as small as a suitcase. You could be sat at home drinking coffee or reading the paper. And as soon as the IMSI catcher is turned on, it tricks your phone and potentially all the other phones in the area into locking onto its system. Once that's done, the operator can track your movements, intercept your messages and your phone calls, even send you fake messages from your friends.
These are not designed to be the simple bugs that you stick under the table to record a conversation. These are powerful devices which can intercept, record, and otherwise interfere with people's communications.
But where could our undercover reporter find such a device? He began his search in Mexico at a conference for the world's surveillance industry. James used his contacts to set up a meeting with Marco Braccioli, senior vice president of the Italian surveillance firm Area, a big player with several government contracts. Would he sell us IMSI catchers for use in South Sudan?
How does it work with the IMSIs? I've heard there's a lot of gray market activity.
There are some people that is trying to sell in the gray market.
How? Where do they get that from?
Ukraine and Russia.
What about your IMSIs? Are these your own products?
We design the IMSI and we make them produce in Turkey.
Right. Let's go grab some lunch.
While they walked, Marco bragged about having a close relationship with the Italian government, which he said helped smooth the export process.
If there is a real need, I can ask informally our authorities is before to waste time and waste money and waste. Is this possible or not? We sell trust. We don't sell products. First of all, we sell trust. So, you can work at the border of the woods, but inside.
For Marco to sell the IMSI catcher legally, he needs a government-authorized export license and an end-user certificate, showing where the technology is headed. Marco explained that when it's a sensitive destination, like South Sudan, the industry sometimes sends the equipment via another country.
So how can I sell a solution, your solution to South Sudan, for example?
If I have an end user statement signed in Tanzania, and then Tanzania give as a gift this system to South Sudan, is something that I can't control as a company.
I heard this many times. This is common, right? That it can work like this.
It's not my method.
A suggestion for how to get around the regulations, and Marco was interested in dealing with our South Sudan clients. A month later, James was invited to Area's headquarters for a demonstration of the IMSI catcher.
The plan is we do a tour of the building, present what can be presented to the customer when they come. So that's the big one. That's a suitcase size.
This is the frequencies.
This is one bidirectional antenna.
You can intercept the communication of your targets or even control the communications, meaning that you can send fake short messages.
After the demonstration, the sales manager Luca De Musio wanted to talk business. He explained that officially selling IMSI catchers to a country like South Sudan from Italy could be a long process.
In order to know if you can export something in a place, you have first to get a purchase order. You can't apply for an export license without having a purchase order.
That's a big, big problem, huh?
It is. That's why I mentioned it, because this is the problem we are facing.
But our undercover reporter suggested an alternative. Use a third country to avoid the Italian export process.
What I can do, what we can consider, is to go through our Turkish partner, okay, and see if they can support you through Dubai, okay, avoiding some of this problem.
While we waited for Area's answer, James moved on to our next client, Iran, and our second product. This equipment could monitor the internet traffic of an entire country.
In the industry, this technology is known as an IP intercept system. It constantly monitors the data being sent over the internet. It can record who is visiting certain websites, who is using certain keywords. It can gather all your internet history. But it's a huge project. In order to capture the data, you must physically insert monitoring devices into the telecommunications infrastructure. Once the system is complete, an entire nation's internet traffic can be monitored and analyzed.
So would any company be willing to sell a system like this to our second client, Iran, despite the European Union sanctions? Fabio Romani is the Chief Executive Officer of Italian company IPS. He explained that supplying IP intercept systems covertly is difficult.
I tell you something, IP interception is not the easiest way, it's not the easiest product to sell and run away.
But that's the requirement.
You get burned. You will get burned. Because it's a long project. It's not something that you ship, you train, you leave the country.
Despite these warnings, when James raised the prospect of a deal to sell intercept systems to Iran, Fabio seemed tempted.
Iran is lovely. Iran is lovely now. It's fully open.
Are you serious?
Iran.
Okay, can you confirm this for me, please? I know money talks in this industry, but I was surprised to hear him say they'll consider a deal in Iran. There are still sanctions in place, and I can't think of a way they're going to be able to get this deal done legally.
Abbas Hakimzadeh knows about Iran's surveillance regime. His involvement in student protests during elections in 2009 brought him to the attention of the then government of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He was targeted as someone to watch.
متوجه شدیم که اینها یعنی به اصطلاح سیستم امنیتی ایران به تکنولوژیایی دست پیدا کرده. این از این طریق هم میتونستن ایمیل افراد رو هک بکنن. تلفن‌های موبایل به عنوان میکروفون استفاده می‌کردن. صداهایی که توی اتاق بود رو میتونستن گوش بکنن و اونا ریکورد بکنن.
With his communications as evidence, the Iranian authorities arrested Abbas.
یه اتاق کوچیک بود، یه شیر آب داشت با دیوارهای بلند، پنجره بالای بالا. منو برد توی اتاق بازجویی و مثلا 2-3 ساعت فقط منو کتک زد. مشت و لگد توی صورت، توی پا، توی کمر.
Well, anyone who has looked at Iran, the young population, can understand the enormous pressure and fear that they live under in a country where surveillance and restrictions and monitoring are not only systematic, but the consequences of being caught speaking your mind can be death.
James was invited to the IPS headquarters near Rome. Sales manager Ugo Santillo was there to meet him.
First, as I wrote you, we are okay with the Iran.
Okay.
Yeah, it is for our virgin countries and virgin customers.
But Ugo appears to know that IP intercept systems cannot currently be legally sold to Iran from Italy.
We're talking about IP interception for Iran.
Okay, now we are talking about something that is classified, okay? So, in this way, of course, it's subject to export restriction. But this is something that we can manage. Fortunately, we have a sister company, Crazy. So we can manage to, I mean, at the end of the day, we are supplying just off-the-shelf hardware with some software.
By using IPS's sister company, Racy, Ugo could describe the product as a simple traffic management system on the export paperwork. That avoids strict surveillance equipment regulations and circumvents international sanctions on Iran.
Racy sells some software for analytics of statistics to traffic congestion. This solution is purely civilian and it's not subject to any restriction. The hardware is the same. The software is completely different, of course.
Basically, through Racy and the road of civil hardware and software, we can basically sell anywhere? Is this correct?
Yeah. But this must be a very, very strong relation with the customer.
Ugo said that they'd done this before.
We sell only this. And we have at least, I think, 20 countries in the world. Not so far, nothing happens because we are very, let's say, conservative and prudent to manage this thing.
There are huge rewards for a contract of this size.
It's something that can cost up to 20 million.
Are you talking euros or US?
Euro. In 4 months from payment, they had the system. They will have the system.
Running?
Right.
With the agreement in place, he suggested that all communication should be very discreet.
Everything will be in white label. I mean, all the documents that we will provide them.
Of course.
Would be, talking about interception. We use, let's say, dummy words, flowers instead of IP, but there will be no logo. The company will be called the supplier, and the customer will be the client. We can even use a fake or dummy email account.
And we throw everything into this account?
Yeah, buddy@gmail.com means Ugo from IPS.
As we left, Fabio Romani, the chief executive officer of IPS, offered his reassurances that the company knew how to handle deals like this.
Oh yeah, what's the discussion?
Very good, very good. I think we made a massive step forward. And next will be a meeting with the end user.
Don't be worried about the export license. Don't be worried about this. It's something that we usually manage. Your ass will not be bored. I will take care of you.
The footage that I've just seen confirms my concern about the actual practices that are going on, that are not in line with how EU regulations function today. Some suppliers won't respect restrictions, but this is among the most blatant and explicit references to circumventing the law, and I think that that is disturbing.
The company will be called the supplier. We sell only this, and we have at least, I think, 20 countries in the world.
You won't get any license to ship to Iran. They are circumventing the regulation on 428 on dual-use items. They will be subject to violation of money laundering because they submit a crime, they make a profit, and then will be minimum 5 to 10 years.
James had agreed our first deal, an illegal plan to sell an IP intercept system to Iran for up to 20 million euros. We asked IPS and RACI for a response to the evidence that they were prepared to break the law by shipping to Iran in this way. The RACI group said that they operate with full respect of the regulations. They also stated that they had been aware of the identity of Al Jazeera's undercover reporter. They had only met him because they believed he might be working for a competitor. They added, "We had no intention of completing this or any deal with the individual our staff met with. Any deal that we may have discussed with him would have been dependent on obtaining full legal authorization from the authorities." In part 2, our undercover reporter delves deeper into the world of illegal surveillance sales. We reveal those prepared to sell to war zones in partnership with their intelligence service.
Did you check with the authorities and did they give you the green light?
Verbally. Nothing on paper.
Who is that from in Turkey?
Mine is called Central Intelligence Agency.
And those who don't care if they sell powerful spyware to criminals or a terrorist organization.
We don't know who is the end user, and we don't care because we have done it before.
It doesn't matter what the morality or the ethics are. As long as I don't get caught, I'll sell it. There's simply a demand. We can supply the demand. It's simple economics.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit has used an insider to infiltrate the secret world of the surveillance industry, exposing the deals that are putting our private communications at risk. James has already negotiated a deal to buy sophisticated monitoring equipment for Iran with Hugo Santillo from IPS. It's a deal that would breach international sanctions.
Something that can cost up to 20 million. In 4 months from payment, they will have the system.
Some suppliers won't respect restrictions, But this is among the most blatant and explicit references to circumventing the law, and I think that that is disturbing.
Later, our undercover reporter reveals the company willing to sell sophisticated surveillance equipment to anyone.
Or maybe we can sell to your shell company and then you do a business with the end user.
Yeah, but you don't need an export certificate for that?
Normally, no. Because normally we will not say this is the IMSI catcher. We say this is a Wi-Fi router.
First, James follows up on proposals to supply surveillance equipment to South Sudan. He travelled to Rome to meet again with Area Vice President Marco Braccioli. He was aware of the reputation of IPS and their sales manager, Ugo Santillo.
This is not something that he heard with me, but Ugo, the nickname of Ugo in the customers of Arabic world is the Italian pimp. And you know this. The trouble of IPS is that they sold in particular countries with an export license without regulation. So anything that encrypt or decrypt something have to be they sold without this document.
Into where?
In places in which there are dictators.
But in the surveillance world, it's not just IPS that may have profited from deals with dictators. The Arab Spring uprisings demonstrated the power of popular protest, but it was also a gold rush for the surveillance industry. The region's leaders raced to crack down on the protest organizers.
I found that activists, students, journalists, opposition figures in North Africa and the Middle East were targeted and sometimes imprisoned as a result of these systems coming from Europe. And I found that unacceptable then. I find it unacceptable today.
We had actual victims coming from Libya, from Syria, who had survived torture, detention, and saying this was the cause of my arrest. They wouldn't have identified me, they wouldn't have tortured me if they hadn't been able to monitor my communications.
Aware of growing dissent, Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president, sought to improve his country's surveillance capabilities in 2009. It was our Italian company, Area, that stepped in to help.
Allora, il progetto in Siria era un progetto per un sistema di intercettazione che potesse coprire l'intero paese.
This man was employed by Area to work on the contract. He'd been told the €13 million system was a civil project bought to assist in criminal investigations. But on a trip to Damascus, he realized the targets of the surveillance technology were Assad's political opponents.
Una volta siamo scesi e oltre a quello ci siamo trovati delle altre persone facenti parte dei servizi di intelligence siriani. E quindi avevano assolutamente bisogno di capire chi potevano essere coloro che avrebbero cominciato a creare i primi disordini, le prime rivolte contro il regime. E quindi sostanzialmente avevano bisogno di un sistema che non servisse per trovare i criminali quanto piuttosto i dissidenti politici. È come andare a comprare un coltello da cucina e trovarti qualcuno che ti sta dicendo che ti vende un fucile mitragliatore, cioè una cosa completamente differente.
He informed Area's management, but he says he was told the company wasn't responsible for how the system would be used.
Nel senso che quando tu crei un sistema di questo genere non puoi pensare di venderlo senza nessuna gestione da un punto di vista etico della cosa.
He took his evidence to the media. Public protests followed, and Area withdrew from the project. At the time, the company claimed that they had a valid export license to supply Syria, and that they had no desire to be accomplices to repression.
Throughout history, corporations and individuals have profited from war. The surveillance industry is really just carrying on a tradition there.
In December 2016, Area's activities in Syria caught up with them. Italian authorities raided their Milan headquarters. Company executives were accused of falsifying the export documents relating to the Syrian deal. And nearly €8 million that the company had received from the Syrian authorities was seized. When James next met Area's Vice President Marco Braccioli to discuss our South Sudan deal, he appeared untroubled by the ongoing investigation.
So they are investigating all the Italian market around some exportation, some exports in the last 5 years. So we are just the first on the list because Area starts with A.
He believed that the investigation would expose other companies as well as Area.
But if you go back in the 5 years, how many other Italians has exported in let me say, deep gray countries? Lots.
Although willing to supply our South Sudan client, Marco warned that obtaining an Italian export license could now take time. But he had a solution. James could buy the IMSI catchers directly from their manufacturer in Turkey. He even made the introductions.
Albert, it's Marco from Area. How are you? Ciao, ciao. Good. Listen to me.
He believed a Turkish export license would be obtained more quickly.
So consider that it's too difficult for me to manage these things from Italy. So the idea is that you can meet him.
Since 2013, tribal and political conflict in South Sudan has led to the deaths of tens of thousands of civilians. The government has been accused of human rights atrocities. The violence has resulted in European Union sanctions and calls for an international arms embargo. Pagan Amom fled the country after being targeted by surveillance equipment bought by the government. In 2013, he was a senior member of the leadership before disagreements with the president led to him being arrested and falsely accused of plotting a coup.
The government, when they interrogated me and told me that they have recordings of my telephone conversations that would incriminate me and that they were going to charge me with treason, punishable by death. Of course, I could not believe it, but I was in a shock.
Pagan fears the impact that the further supply of surveillance equipment will have on his country.
The government, with that surveillance, has reduced the political space for our citizens to speak. The right of freedom of speech has been curtailed, even to speak in private.
A few weeks later, Alpa Tusan, the founder of Turkish company BTT, agreed to meet our reporter in Milan. it would finally conclude our deal to supply South Sudan's military with IMSI catchers.
Hi, how are you? I don't know if you've ever done business with the South Sudanese. Between us, they're military people, intelligence people.
Are they going to use it in the country, or do they want to use it on the borders against other neighbors? Those are the scenarios that we have to go through.
Export. You mentioned it's not a problem. But did you check with the authorities? And did they give you the green light?
Verbally. Nothing on paper.
Who was that from in Turkey?
Mine is called Central Intelligence Agency.
Although he claimed to have permission from Turkish intelligence, Alper appeared keen to disguise the true nature of the IMSI catcher.
Anything which is considered to be dual use, which is our case, because my equipment is actually a telecommunication equipment. I don't want to mention the software inside, but actually it's a box where you can make calls through it.
Why don't you want to mention the software inside? What's the problem with that?
Then I need to go a longer procedure. I say this is dual-use telecom equipment, okay? And most of the time, it is a telecom testing equipment. This is the main purpose that I'm declaring. While doing it, I inform my clients that I'm doing this. This is how I do it.
It was the same strategy that we had seen in our other deal in this industry. Hide the software and the real purpose of the product, and you can circumvent the surveillance export regulations. For Alper, complying with Turkey's export procedure was too slow.
It takes around 6 months to get an answer. Then it's too difficult.
Alper claimed that his plan would have the equipment delivered to our client more quickly.
How long would it take to get the IMSIs?
4 weeks.
I find it absolutely unacceptable that there are people willing to sell to countries where the human rights violations are obvious. South Sudan could be on the brink of massive violence.
To conduct this surveillance in violation of the law, this is absolutely very dangerous. And it becomes actually weapons of mass destruction.
I do believe that every individual, no matter who their employer is, should really look themselves in the mirror and wonder, what am I doing?
These are the things that states that want to get ahead in their security capabilities, they'll pay big money for. These are the nuclear weapons of the 21st century.
We approached BTT with our evidence, but they failed to provide a response. We also asked Area about the behaviour of their staff and whether they represented the ethics of the company. Area works with the relevant governments to ensure the proper export and legal use of our equipment. They added that they wouldn't be able to comment further until they had seen the evidence.
We very rarely actually seen this clear evidence of how companies attempt to go around regulations and seek to go around regulations. If that is happening on a massive scale, that is hugely concerning.
We're not talking here about regulation, about an export control. We're talking about criminal qualification, saying that these commercial agreements amount to complicity, to torture, to crimes against humanity or war crimes.
The third and final deal that James hoped to seal was even more brazen. To buy IMSI catchers without revealing the name of our client. The sale of this type of surveillance equipment is highly restricted. Using this ploy, James could be buying the spyware for anyone. Corporations willing to spy on business rivals, criminal gangs, or terrorist organizations.
It doesn't matter what the morality or the ethics are. As long as I don't get caught, I'll sell it. There's simply a demand. We can supply the demand. It's simple economics.
There have been scandals in South Africa and in India where IMSI catchers have been imported and used and abused by private parties. The telephone calls of politicians were illegally intercepted and recorded and then published.
We contacted a business called Semtien. a multi-million-dollar surveillance company based in China. Would they do a deal without an export license, or knowing who the client would be? We arranged a meeting at our reporter's hotel.
Heavy, very heavy. So the interface, two antenna, two channel, and GPS and modem, and this is for the ground.
He explained that they produced different models of the IMSI, and the configuration and capabilities would be tailored to our clients' requirements.
This is very important that we have a clear understanding about this. We're talking about 10 units here.
10 unit, okay.
We have a client where no export certificate can be provided.
You mean this is not the government?
He was hesitant at first, aware of how such spyware can be misused if it ends up in the wrong hands.
Yeah, but the key point is that the end user. What we worry about is that the end user is like the terrorist.
Of course, it's not in our interest to sell to any terrorist organizations.
Yeah. Private user is very sensitive. It's more sensitive than the government.
But in this industry, money talks. As with our other deals, he would lie on the paperwork to avoid the export restrictions on surveillance equipment.
We can sell to your shell company and then you do a business with the end user.
Yeah, but you don't need an export certificate for that?
Normally, no. Because normally we will not say this is the IMSI catcher. We say this is a Wi-Fi router. We just apply for the Chinese government that this is the Wi-Fi router, so it's okay. We just sell it.
Basically, you falsify the documents, the shipping documents, and you say this is not an IMSI catcher?
Yeah, actually you don't know this at all. You see this Wi-Fi here. It works for Wi-Fi also. Hey, Greg. Hey,
With the prospect of a multi-million-dollar deal, he invited his boss to join the discussions. When Semtien co-founder Frank Fung arrived, he had no desire to know who the clients would be.
What would be the suggestion? How can we sell it to private users?
就我们只卖给深客户，之前我们提到过说，我们先卖给他，就是他对接这种客户。对。我们是这样，我们不想直接卖给，直接面对这个end user。Yeah, we don't face to the private company. We face to you only. So you face to the private user, but for the service like the delivery training, we done by us. Yeah, but for contract, I think we only for you.
Okay, so we can do it through a shell company, basically.
Shell company, yes.
You've done that before.
We have done it. But we don't know who is the private company and who is the end user. And we don't care about it. This way it's good, because we have done it before.
They would also remove any reference to their company from the IMSI catcher.
We don't print any sentence logo here. Yeah.
Brand, no brand.
No any brand.
We wipe everything. Wipe everything.
With the plan agreed, the conversation turns to the payment.
What's the price for a unit like this?
$200,000 to $300,000.
Is it possible for you to give us order before the end of this year? I have to reach some performance, so that's my concern.
It's truly remarkable when you consider what the implications of this might be.
For many of these companies, all they care about is that the cash is green.
They don't seem to care at all. And that's what's really concerning. Who's going to be using this? Are they going to be criminals? Are they going to be gangs? private businessman to spy on his opponents.
It shows that these companies and this business has developed in total secrecy, above the law, above any kind of regulation, and this is very frightening and problematic.
We asked SEMTN for a response to our findings, but they have not replied. After 4 months posing as a middleman in the surveillance industry, James appeared to have found companies willing to supply both the clients that we proposed, as well as one seller not caring where the equipment ends up. For the first time, we have revealed how companies in this secretive industry ignore regulations.
Anyone with enough money is able to buy these highly sophisticated systems which could proliferate all over the world. I would like to see more accountability and transparency in this very, very dark and dangerous market.
Once the genie's out of the bottle, I think there will be sort of an escalation that the bad guys have this device, now the police force must have this device. And I think the loser will be the general public.
I've worked in and around the industry long enough to know that there will always be some companies prepared to break the rules. If you tighten legislation here, they'll find a loophole there. If things get too difficult to operate out of Europe, they'll just move somewhere else. For me, controlling the spread of this technology is almost impossible.
The surveillance state is the asset that eats out democracy from within.
If we can't find a way to bring surveillance and the practice of surveillance within the rule of law, it's going to have huge effects for democracy.
Anything you do could be monitored, analyzed, collected, or stored by people you don't know about and entities that you're not aware of.
When you sell a tank to a government in Central Africa, you don't have to worry about that tank rolling through the streets of Paris. It stays in Africa. But this spying technology has a way of coming back.